Tonight on KPBS Evening Edition, millions across California prepare for a historic power outage. Live coverage on the wildfire concerns here at home and what you need to know to avoid being left in the dark. Plus, Governor Gavin Newsom is in town to take on affordable housing, his plans to financially help renters and homeowners. And body cam video is released of a fatal officer-involved shooting, why some locally call it controversial. KPBS Evening Edition starts now. Good evening. It's Wednesday, October 9th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Priya Sridhar. It's being hailed as a historic blackout. Power companies across the state set to cut off electricity to more than 1 million people, tens of thousands here in San Diego County. It's the most sweeping effort ever to prevent wildfires caused by downed power lines. KPBS reporter Shalina Chatlani begins our coverage with the impact and concern from the red flag warning now in effect. Shalina?
Priya, we're in Lakeside, one of the many communities familiar with wildfires. Folks in these homes and throughout the county need to be ready for changing conditions. The National Weather Service has already issued a red flag warning for many parts of San Diego, including rural East County. And here at the SDG&E Emergency Operations Center, a team of 6 fire scientists and meteorologists are closely monitoring wind and climate conditions to see when might be the best time to power down. Brian D'Agostino, the director of fire science for the utility, says the team is expecting to see the highest risks on Friday.
The red flag warning stays in effect until Friday evening at 6 p.m. After that, we'll have to do an assessment if we do experience any power outages. So we certainly would like to be prepared and folks to be prepared into the day Saturday.
D'Agostino says these hot winds, known as the Santa Ana winds, are a moderate event this time. And he says the utility considers turning off power lines to be a tool of last resort. But this outage isn't a first. SDG&E has been doing this to mitigate wildfire risks since 2013. In fact, the most recent outage was late last year.
It's absolutely the last resort. It's really, we'll look at multiple steps that our engineering teams and our operations teams keep steps that they take to keep the electric system safe. We have reclosing devices on the system. We could even put the system into a sensitive setting to try to ensure that it can operate safely.
D'Agostino says the company doesn't know exactly how many people are going to experience a power outage, but it decided to go ahead and notify 30,000 people. He says depending on conditions, it could be more or less going without power. As for those with medical conditions requiring electricity, SDG&E officials say they need to prepare emergency. But it's also worth noting that many are not as pleased with the idea of shutting off power. Among them is San Diego County Supervisor Diane Jacob, who told us she is opposed to the idea. Reporting live from Lakeside, I'm Shalina Chatlani for KPBS News. Priya?
Shalina, thanks so much for that report. And for more information on the possible power outages, we do have a map and the list of locations on our website, kpbs.org, as well as more details on the wildfire and wind concerns. And the concern over losing electricity is all too real for nearly 1 million power customers in the Bay Area and fire-prone parts of Northern California. The state's largest utility company, PG&E, is also intentionally cutting its power. Meredith Wood has details.
Businesses shuttering, residents prepping.
Just thought I'd bring along some small candles just in case.
And officials alerting.
We need to be compassionate in action and make sure that our seniors, those with medical devices, and others are taken care of.
All the signs of a typical natural disaster. But this time, it's in an effort to stop the disaster before it happens.
We're anticipating a public safety power shutoff to nearly 800,000 customers.
Forecasters warn extremely windy and dry conditions in the area are a perfect recipe for wildfires.
I mean, it is an inconvenience. I understand because of the campfire, and we did lose a home there.
Pacific Gas and Electric agreed to pay billions of dollars in damages for the role their equipment played in last year's deadly campfire. Now the company is looking to be proactive. While some people appreciate the efforts,
they want to make sure it's, it's going to be okay. So I'm okay with a couple of days.
Others are not as thrilled.
If it wasn't for, I guess, a lack of PG&E doing their job in the first place, this probably wouldn't be necessary.
PG&E says the intentional blackout could last several days. Once the winds die down, the company will conduct safety inspections before restoring power. I'm Meredith Wood reporting.
Wind speeds and warm, dry weather is fueling the fear of wildfires and power outages. Let's go now to meteorologist Daji Aswad for a look at what's ahead.
Winds are kicking up here across Southern California as we watch a jet move further to the east, allowing for that trough to bring in some cooler air. But the cooling will just be temporary for most locations. And in fact, we'll be watching our temperatures rise here into the late week forecast as high pressure builds in, creating an offshore flow. That's going to allow for a dry, meaning less moisture. Tonight, your dew point temperatures in the upper 60s, by the morning at 50 degrees for the dew point temperature, and continue to crash at 34 for your dew point temperature tomorrow this time around. So low humidity, low moisture, and windy conditions are going to be leading to this red flag warning that will remain in place Thursday 3 a.m. all the way to your Friday 6 p.m.
Governor Gavin Newsom is in San Diego today taking on the affordable housing crisis. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman was there as Newsom signed a bill providing more than $300 million to protect renters and homeowners.
All done. Thank you.
Newsom signed the bill surrounded by housing advocates. It aims to help cash-strapped renters and homeowners avoid evictions and foreclosures.
Roughly 8 million of us in the state of California are renters that have deep anxiety every 1st and 15th of the month.
This coming just after the governor signed the strictest rent cap bill in the nation. Newsom says these are necessary measures to deal with an extreme crisis.
We're living in a state where over 30% of Californians are spending, or roughly 30% are spending 50% of their income. 50% of their income on rent, which is an extraordinary number.
The governor says spending that much on housing is a recipe for disaster.
That means they have no money to set aside for uncertainty. And that's why so many people end up out on the streets. We wonder what the hell's going on in the state as it relates to homelessness. It's about affordability. We have created this mess. It's not very complicated. It's 7th grade Econ 101. Supply, demand, imbalance. Not enough supply, huge demand, increased costs.
Newsom says the solution is in plain sight: build more housing, something that cities need to get behind.
It happens at the local level. 470 plus cities, 58 counties doing their job. And I say lovingly and respectfully, doing their job. And that is building more density around transit corridors.
10 cities in San Diego County recently voted against a proposal requiring them to plan for a lot more housing.
No city ever would like to say, give me a number to build. They all say I'm built out. No city is built out.
SANDAG is the agency implementing housing mandates from the state. Their executive director says cities need to stop pointing fingers and take responsibility.
And every city have to do their part so you don't push things around. Every city has to build for future generations.
And if they don't?
We're not just talking about people going into debt because they can't afford housing. They're going out on the streets, or in some ways, for me, most indignant part, they're leaving the state altogether. How many kids cannot afford to live in the home they grew up in?
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Newly released body camera video shows that what happened during an officer-involved shooting by San Diego police in August. KPBS reporter Claire Tragesser analyzed the video and explains what led to the deadly confrontation. A warning: some footage may be alarming.
The shooting took place on Adelaide Avenue in the El Cerrito neighborhood. It began when the aunt of 52-year-old Dennis Carolino called 911 to say he was having a mental health crisis and had thrown a brick at her.
And he threw it at you?
He hit me, but I was able to...
You were able to what?
I was able to keep away from it.
The body camera footage then shows two officers arriving on scene to talk to the aunt.
I'm gonna go with you with the doctor. Are you taking your medicine? He doesn't answer me.
They tell her a clinician with the psychiatric emergency response team will come help. These teams are often called in to help officers defuse situations involving people suffering from mental health issues. But the officers did not wait for Pert to arrive before encountering Carolino. They walk to the side of the house and shine a flashlight on the room Carolino's aunt says he's in.
Let me see your hands. Let me see your hands. Relax, drop it. Drop it. Drop it.
The officer who shot Carolino was a 4-year veteran of the force. His partner, a 16-year veteran, fired only his taser. KPBS confirmed that the officers had called for Pert, but the team had not yet arrived when the shooting happened. Even if the team had arrived, they couldn't be the first to contact Carolino. Claire Tregesser, KPBS News.
In past officer-involved shootings, this information was not released until after the district attorney's office completes its investigation, which hasn't happened yet in this case. But a new law requires police to release body camera footage within 45 days of an incident. Now, an update in the case of Earl McNeil, a man who died in custody after an encounter with law enforcement in May of 2018. The San Diego County Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board voted last night to sustain a finding that a San Diego sheriff's deputy violated a use of force policy during McNeil's arrest. Investigators found the deputy improperly placed a shirt over McNeil's face that may have contributed to his death. The district attorney's office cleared all officers and deputies from criminal liability. McNeil's family is suing officers involved. The city of San Diego and SDSU are at odds over how much the city's Mission Valley Stadium property is worth. This comes after a draft appraisal was released Tuesday. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen explains.
The appraisal values the site at just over $68 million. That includes about $18 million in discounts for tearing down the old Chargers Stadium and constructing a river park. The university plans on purchasing the land to fund a new stadium for Aztec football games, plus housing and a satellite campus. Gina Jacobs, SDSU's lead staffer on the Mission Valley deal, says the university will pay for the river park and prepare the property for development.
We will also be responsible for the cost of the demolition. Those things are all still true. We just believe that some of them should be considered in determining fair market value.
Now, city staffers counter those discounts to the sale price mean taxpayers would be footing the bill for the old stadium demolition and the river park. City Council member Scott Sherman, whose district includes the property, says that breaks a promise that those things will be fully covered by SDSU.
You know, they said they'll build a river park and maintain it with no cost to the taxpayers' general fund, but yet they want to deduct the cost of that construction from the purchase price and the appraised value of the land. To me, that's costing the taxpayers money.
Now, the city has yet to receive a formal offer from SDSU. The university is still aiming to present a final deal to the CSU Board of Trustees by January. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
He finally said it. For the first time, Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden called for President Trump's impeachment for abusing the powers of his office. More now from reporter Jeff Zeleny.
To preserve our Constitution, our democracy, our basic integrity, he should be impeached.
For the first time today, Joe Biden calling for the impeachment of President Trump, dropping any caveats of waiting for the outcome of the House investigation.
President Trump has indicted himself by obstructing justice, refusing to comply with the congressional inquiry. He's already convicted himself.
In a speech in New Hampshire, Biden joining many of his Democratic rivals in calling for Trump's removal from office, saying the president has repeatedly undermined American democracy.
We see it in Trump's own words. We see it in the text from State Department officials that have been made public. We see it in his pulling much of the United States government into his corrupt schemes, individuals within the government, his appointees.
It's the latest escalation from Biden, who initially supported an impeachment inquiry and planned to withhold final judgment. But he said too many damning details have already been disclosed about Trump pushing foreign leaders to meddle in the 2020 election.
We all laughed when he said he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and get away with it. It's no joke. He's shooting holes in the Constitution, and we cannot let him get away with it.
He also mounted another defense of his son, Hunter Biden, and the work for a Ukraine gas company while Biden was vice president, an arrangement Trump has seized upon with no evidence of wrongdoing by either Biden.
He's targeted me and my family with lies and distortions and smears. And that's all they are. Because he thinks he will undermine my candidacy for the nomination.
Here in New Hampshire, Democratic voters are still sizing up the field, but not Biden's integrity.
That was reporter Jeff Zeleny. As for the impeachment investigation, top Democrats say they are preparing a flurry of subpoenas to force the administration to comply. Just days after the Trump administration pulls U.S. troops back from the Syrian border, Turkey is now waging a deadly military offensive there. And as KPBS reporter Max Rivlin-Nadler shows us, the Kurdish community here in San Diego is watching with fear and outrage.
On Sunday, the White House announced after a call between the Turkish and American presidents that American troops would be withdrawing from Syria. Turkey has long considered the Kurdish minority in Syria a source of terrorism, and on Wednesday, its troops began to roll in and fire on Kurdish cities. Ahmedzada is a Kurd born in Syria. He immigrated to the U.S. in the 1980s and still has family and friends there. To him, the withdrawal of American forces from the region in anticipation of the Turkish invasion is a deep betrayal after the Kurds fought for years against ISIS.
I have not met a single American who did not appreciate the sacrifices the Kurds made fighting ISIS. The Kurds lost 11,000 people fighting ISIS. And to protect the United States, to protect the West, they lost their lives over there to protect humanity.
He hasn't been able to turn away from the news all week.
I'm just so upset. I have not been at work since Monday. I went yesterday for a couple of hours, then I came back. Today I haven't been at work yet. I've been glued to the news, hope for a glimmer of good news, so I haven't been at work even. Even when I'm at work, I'm not myself.
Ahmed's daughter, Shireen, was born in the U.S.
As a Kurdish Syrian American, it's a mixture of anger and confusion. Anger at the lack of a reaction from the international community.
The Kurdish population in America is relatively small, but has seen a serious uptick since the outbreak of the Syrian civil war in 2011. Along with Dallas and Nashville, San Diego is one of the largest centers for Kurdish American life. Many Kurds are also part of the larger Syrian community in San Diego, which has come together during the 8-year-long civil war. Yara Ayash is the director of operations at the Syrian Community Network in San Diego, a nonprofit that helps asylum seekers and refugees resettle in the U.S.
It's a collectivist community, so they really rely on each other. They lean on each other a lot.
Trump said that America had spent enough money protecting the Kurdish minority. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have criticized the move. Ahmed says that residents of San Diego can help support the Kurdish community by getting in touch with their elected representatives.
I do plea to the people in San Diego. I've been living here for 14 years. I consider myself not to be from San Diego. It's really to go and write to their congressmen, write to their senators.
On Friday, Ahmed and Shireen will be protesting alongside other Kurdish Americans outside of the federal building in downtown San Diego in an effort to stop what is quickly becoming a desperate situation for Kurds in Syria. Max Rivlin-Nadler, KPBS News.
The co-founder of CRISPR, a technology that can edit DNA, paid a visit to San Diego. KPBS science and technology reporter Shalina Chatlani got a chance to speak with her about the future of gene editing and the ethical concerns surrounding it.
At the Scripps Institution of Oceanography on the UC San Diego campus, biochemist Jennifer Doudna has just arrived.
Well, it's great to be here and to have an opportunity to share the world of CRISPR and genome editing down here in San Diego.
Doudna co-discovered CRISPR-Cas9, a gene editing tool, with her colleague Emmanuel Charpentier in 2012. In a nutshell, CRISPR is a protein that can go into a cell or tissue in any biological organism. So plants, animals, humans, and like scissors, cut open a string of DNA. And when that happens, DNA coding can be altered, so genes or biological traits can be changed. You are the co-founder of CRISPR gene editing technology. Can you tell me about it and what type of potential does it have?
What I'm excited about is the opportunity to cure genetic diseases, things like sickle cell anemia or Huntington's disease, potentially in the future something like cystic fibrosis. These are all diseases that have well-known single genetic causes, single genes that affect the patient. And what CRISPR technology does is to provide a strategy for correcting or at least mitigating those disease-causing mutations. And that's not a fantasy. It's not 200 years in the future. It's something that I think over the next decade we will see those kinds of cures coming to fruition.
This past July, doctors for the first time in the United States officially used CRISPR to treat a patient with sickle cell anemia, a disease that creates deformed blood cells and can cause a shortened lifespan as well as some painful conditions. Doctors used CRISPR to give the patient her own modified and much healthier blood cells. But while examples like these show promise, some ethicists have raised questions, especially since CRISPR is widely deployed around the world. Gene editing can obviously be used for a number of different issues. So what do you have to say about some of the potential negative side effects of this?
I think anytime there's a powerful technology that comes along, it often comes with both opportunities to create great value and benefit to society, but also risks, and I think that's true for CRISPR as well. For example, being able to change the DNA in developing humans in the germline that would create changes to DNA that affect not only an individual, but also can be inherited by future generations. So that's something that I've been working on for several years with my colleagues to educate people about that possibility and to really welcome a global discussion about how to appropriately regulate this technology.
A simple Google search of gene editing brings up stories on the potential, like genetically modified crops that can resist climate change. But these stories exist alongside headlines on designer babies and super soldiers for the military. A new Netflix series titled Unnatural Selection considers these scenarios. It also makes it seem like CRISPR technology is fairly easy to access. Doudna says while gene editing is widely available, it still requires biochemical expertise to use.
I think it's important to separate fact from fiction. Of course, storytellers love to, scare us and bring up ideas that are sort of fantastical, and I think that's true for this Netflix series. But I think that it's important for people to understand that, those of us that are actually working in the field appreciate that this technology has tremendous positive potential.
Doudna says there's a lot of next steps with this technology. But for now, she's working on organizing a genetic research nonprofit in the San Francisco Bay Area. The goal, she says, is to take practical biomedical ideas off the ground and make sure gene editing is equitable.
I don't personally want to create a cure for genetic disease that's only affordable by the 0.001%.
Doudna says funding for science for the sake of curiosity is a huge part of making sure the research can happen.
Why should the public support curiosity-driven scientific research? And the reason is that that's how science is that we don't know where it's going in the future. And this is the purpose of curiosity-driven science, is to understand our world. And every now and then you turn over a proverbial rock and you find something that you couldn't have imagined was there. And that's true for CRISPR.
Doudna is the recipient of this year's Nierenberg Prize for Science in the Public Interest from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. Shalina Chatlani, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, one-on-one with Secretary of State Pompeo, talking about Turkey, China, and Ukraine. Coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
As we mentioned earlier in the newscast, we are in for some hot and dry weather over the next few days. Meteorologist Daji Aswad has our full forecast.
We're saying goodbye to the marine layer as high pressure will be building in for tonight and moving through the late week. This is going to allow for a strong wind event here. Santa Ana wind setting up, and we'll definitely be looking at the likelihood for some power outage potential. Now, for tonight, there will still be some low clouds and fog in San Diego, dropping down into lower 60s. We'll be looking at an overnight low in Oceanside at 50 degrees and cooling down to 60 in Borrego Springs, Mount Laguna an overnight low at 43. So it's a bit on the chilly side. Temperatures will trend a bit warmer, and that is because we no longer have an onshore flow, but an offshore flow. And that offshore flow is going to be allowing for lower humidity and lower moisture, as well as I mentioned, high winds. We could see some gusts upwards to 60 miles per hour starting from Thursday 3 a.m. all the way into your Friday 6 p.m., leading to a red flag warning, meaning the risk for some fire danger in a place like Pine Valley or Fallbrook. So in that occasion, we definitely want to remain cautious about your activities outdoors related to fire. Looking at a high of 79 for tomorrow on Oceanside, topping off in the mid-70s for San Diego. Breezy conditions finding themselves not only at the coast, also into the valleys, mountains, and deserts. Borrego Springs a high of 82 and topping off at 61 in Mount Laguna. It is dry, no moisture. Then as we head into this weekend, we will notice some of that windy weather breaking down. As far as temperatures go, you're looking at a high of 79 tomorrow at the coast, 84 for Friday, mostly sunny skies. And then temperatures will continue to cool back down into the late weekend and early week. We're looking at lots of sunshine in inland areas, windy conditions, as I mentioned, and cool conditions, breezy conditions in the mountains and deserts. Reporting for KPBS News, I'm your meteorologist, Dajia Swad. Back to you.
And that's going to do it for us right now. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have a great evening.